And here's the same thing. And this is going to show you how all of those relate to each other. First of all, I have X's across the forearms. And the reason for that is you have no need, absolutely no need, to use a forearm attachment ever. And that is because the forearm attachments will act exactly the same as elbow attachments. So anything that you want to attach to the forearm of a character, you can just attach to its elbow and place it where the forearm is. Same thing. I didn't X it out, but probably the same thing with the hands. You'll very rarely use the hand attachments on a visible character. I would say never, because it just doesn't work out. On invisible characters, you might use them to put some sort of hand thing, but that doesn't work out very well either. On some of the invisible characters that I've done, I actually just attach it to the elbow and then put it where the hands are, and it works fine that way. Okay, so what are these lines? These lines are showing you where your props are going to go from the attachment point to work in that spot. So the shoulders, they're going to come down to the elbow. The elbows are going to come down toward the hand. Hips are going to come down toward the knees, knees down toward the feet. And then, like I said, the feet get a little weird because they come out. The attachment point is at the back of the foot rather than the middle of the foot. And you'll notice this if you try something like if you attach the boot prop to an invisible character and then run around, it looks really funky because it is rotating at the back rather than in the middle. Now, the interesting parts and the most difficult parts of building characters out of props with attachments are three middle pieces. And that's because they don't line up the way that the limb neatly like the limbs do. With the limbs, if you run props from the shoulder to the elbow, you get a fairly neat junction there. You'll still need to cover it up with something else so it looks good, but they'll meet there and work more or less. Not so much with the three in the middle. The reason that I have a line moving up from the root into the stomach is because the back side and the root together make up the midsection. But the way that the character bends, say during the yawn animation or while running, is right in this, the pivot point is right in this oval right here. And so because of that, your props from the back side here are going to run down, and props from the root are going to run up. And where they meet, that's the trouble spot. That's the really tricky part. What you're going to need to do in an invisible character, you have to find a prop to put there in that spot that'll cover up the junction. In an invisible character, you need to find a prop to put in that junction. In a visible character, you're going to need to convincingly hide that junction inside the character. And as thin as Project Spark characters are, that becomes a real challenge sometimes. You run into a similar problem with the head. The head has a lot of space going down to the root because of the way that it functions is in the Y plane, the backside is fairly close to the shoulders, so when the character bends over, the shoulders and backside more or less move together, but the head does not. If you attach something to a character's head, you're going to notice a big gap between the head and the shoulder area where the neck is. But if you're wanting to cover that up, this oval area becomes a challenge, because just like with the backside, if it bends over and your object is too long, it's going to poke out of the character and it's going to look bad. So let's get rid of this. Okay, so my typical setup for creating characters, I do two versions. I have a small character at 100%, and I have a large character at 400% scale. The reason I do that is because at a larger scale, it's a little bit easier to work with. What I use the small scale character for is I test out my props next to it to see if a prop that I want to use is going to be able to scale down small enough to work at that scale. And then I'll scale it up and place it and attach it on my 400% scale. And then when I'm happy with what I've attached, what I'll do is I'll make a copy of the 400 and I'll scale it down to 100. And then I can test it out, or put it in my game or whatever I want to do with it. Okay, so what you're looking for in objects, for the most part, is something that's going to scale down on this guy, the small guy. And for the most part, those are the uniform objects. What you're looking for is things like this marine grenade, helmet, things that are about the same length in all three dimensions. Those will scale down the most. Some other things that you'll also be looking for are things that have a bit of a long dimension for the limbs, because you're going to need to cover all of this area from the hip to the knee for the thighs. Same thing with the shoulder to the elbow on the arms. And when you do find that your props that you're working with, I have a selection here that I use a lot. You can use just about any, it doesn't really matter. I just picked a few just to show a couple of different items that you can use. You want to go into the prop and clear out any code that it has in the brain. That's important because once you attach it, if it still has code, it's going to act exactly like it would if it wasn't attached. And then go into the properties and go into physics, and you want to make sure that collidable is off and physics type is fixed. And the reason for that is the way the physics engine works in Project Spark is if collidable is on, because that object is swinging around all over the place on the character, it attains a lot of momentum and things will go flying all over the world. This is part of the reason a game like Swordman works, because if you look at the code on Swordman, the physics on those attachments that Swordman is made up of, the collidable is on, and things go flying off of Swordman as he hits him, and it's funny. But for the most part, on characters, you do not want that to happen, so you want to make sure they're turned off. And then the last thing you want to do is go into sound. Some objects will have default sounds, and you want to get rid of those. And then while you're in there, turn your max fade distance to 1 and your volume to 0. Sometimes sound does weird things in Project Spark, and if you can just get rid of any sound that an object might be generating or interfering with, it's better to do it than not. Okay, so first thing I'm going to start with is joints. And all of these props that I am using right here, I know already work at a smaller scale, so I'm not going to worry about checking that. But when you pick a prop, you just want to check it, make sure it's going to work. If it does, just set it aside, and then you can use it later.